Yes, welcome back. You're watching The Big Question. Is it time for NASA to change tact? That's the big question tonight. Remember, join the conversation. You can tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya is our Twitter handle. You can also text us on 22422. Remember to use the hashtag The Big Question. My Twitter handle is at Freddy Ndimuli. 14 days to that date set for that swearing-in ceremony slated that we expect Raila Odinga will be sworn in as the people's president. At least 3 of the 4 principals within NASA appear not ready for that event. That's what we're getting from the reports this evening, and that's a big question tonight. Is it time for NASA to change tact? 2 weeks to that date set. It is a very big date. They've talked about it a lot. The opposition leadership now appears split in 2 camps. One side insisting they have to go on with that swearing-in ceremony. The other appearing a bit reluctant on this. Now, let's start with you this evening. Probably let me introduce my guest. Sorry for that. Martin Olo, an advocate of the High Court, also a political analyst on my extreme left, and also, of course, Mark Bichachi, political analyst as well.
Thank you, Fred.
Let's start with you, Martin. Is it the kind of stalemate that could spell doom for a coalition like NASA, that they're split on such a fundamental question at this point, 2 weeks to that big date?
I think it's good news for them. Good news because they can actually now save their face and say, after all, the swearing-in won't happen because we are not agreed. So we don't postpone it, we just cancel it altogether. So it's good news. Secondly, I think that I expect that both Kalonzo Musyoka and Wetangula to know the law very well, because they are lawyers, to be able to ascertain that what they're just about to engage in won't take them far legally. But because the political process, and because we also know that political processes also take a very short lifespan, Kenyans will soon forget about it. So they could as well forget about the swearing in, and they'll be sure there will be another crisis for them to address themselves on, and life must go on.
But the big question tonight, Mark, is it time for NASA to change tact? Is it the right time? Because 2 weeks to that date, of course, politically, legally speaking, probably, yes, they understand a few things in terms of law, but politically speaking, there are expectations from their supporters, Raila Odinga's supporters, Kalonzo Musyoka's supporters. They've promised a lot. If they decide that, okay, fine, all we've promised was just water under the bridge, it's no longer going to happen. There are risks involved as well, politically.
Yes, huge risks. And that's why they need to borrow words from a very famous song called The Gambler. You've got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. When I joined Maseno School, the first thing we were taught in rugby is the most important thing in rugby is you've got to know how to fall. And the reality of the matter is this, that the horses have bolted, the ship has sailed, and the fat lady has sung. It's over. Politically, there's little space for them to wiggle through. Legally, the loopholes are all closed. So the only option that NASA has moving forward is, how do we fall gracefully? How do we fall in a way that we can stand again? How do we fall in a way that makes sure that our supporters can count on us again in 2022?
Yes.
Because right now, if they try to do a swearing in, there are double risks involved. Number one is you could do a swearing in that has absolutely no impact, in the sense that your followers don't show up in the numbers that you expect them, or the government does not react in the way that you expect, and you still fall. Or you don't do the swearing in, and then you have a bit of egg on your face, but you have the dignity to carry yourself into another day. And that's what they need to decide.
Is it that simple that it'll just be egg on the face if they cancel this swearing-in ceremony? Because Raila Odinga appears to be in a tight spot. On one side, he's expected to pacify his supporters. On the other hand, he's trying really hard to hold this coalition together, at least for the foreseen future. Do you think it would be that simple just to say, okay, fine, we're no longer going on with this ceremony?
I think that's why I was saying that they are lucky because they are not agreeing, and therefore you can have an excuse to get out of it. Because basically you wanted to do it, but you realize that you need to build a bit of more consensus in order for you to get it there. But it's a face-saving issue, because really, as Mark says, you are walking yourself into a tight corner. So what after you've been sworn in? What will your supporters expect you to do? Where will you go, and what will you deliver? And what will you say after 5 years that you are doing? So that, were you in government? What did you do? What programs did you initiate? So there's a bit of a tight corner here, and the sooner they find a way out of it, the better.
But for Raila Odinga especially, do you think he still has what it takes to navigate through this and come out on top?
Sure, absolutely. For Raila, you give it to him. And for politicians, you give it to them. You know, there is no situation that politicians, good politicians, can ever find themselves unable to come out of. Because the same way you're going with your supporters is the same way you'll tell your supporters, hey, wait, we got a roadblock there, let's now follow this end. And since they are beholden to your views and ideas, they'll come along with you.
Yet, looking at some of the feedback on Twitter, some people are seeing this as probably the end of the coalition, NASA as we know it, because yes, now they're split along party lines. Wiper says this, ANC says the other, Ford Kenya says something else. ODM appears to be alone in this. Don't you think that there's a risk that this could just be the last straw that broke the camel's back?
Anytime a coalition agreement is written, it is written for success, it's never written for failure. Because in success, everyone has something to gain. There are positions, there's influence, there are contracts, there are all number of things that go your way when you've won power. But when you've lost power throughout the world, coalitions generally don't tend to stand. And probably this is one of the things that NASA needs to think about, that instead of remaining a coalition, do they want to form a political party? And if so, how will it look like? Because I can promise you and I can guarantee you today as we speak, the reality of the matter to hold together as NASA is near impossible. Because you've got 4 or 5 positions to hand out among a class of politicians that is hundreds strong. So it's not going to work, it's not going to hold together. And what is going to be critical is they need to seize the opportunity that has always been before their eyes and they've not seen it. In any democracy, the second most powerful position you can hold is not to swear yourself in, is to become an opposition leader. And if there's someone who's a fish in water in opposition, it's Raila Odinga.
So you don't see a future for NASA?
To be honest with you, if they continue on this trend, no, it's gone.
Martin, do you agree with
a quick one, that coalitions form to share power. There's no power to share. So if there's no power to share, the next is you look for different ways of either walking, going your ways, or coalescing for better things.
Or looking for political survival.
Absolutely.
In other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I mean, NASA as we know it was formed to share power in the event that they won. They did not win.
Okay.
So what do you have? Go back to your, little cocoons. I mean, you got Wiper, you got ANC, you got other players. So you go back there and you find your home.
Okay, and talking about the party lines, now Wiper appears to be going different ways, Ford Kenya another different way, and some people within ODM are already accusing members of these two parties of already talking to Jubilee, probably then angling for cabinet positions. Do you think that will happen, that probably members of Ford Kenya or Wiper party could find themselves in Kenyatta's cabinet?
Let's not forget, our late cabinet secretary in charge of internal security was a member of ODM. And he became cabinet secretary substantively during the last term of President Uhuru Kenyatta. So number one, if it does happen, it is not strange. Number two, the whole point of seeking political office is to gain political power. Okay? You've lost an election. If you're given an opportunity to become a cabinet secretary or to remain in opposition, fighting, by the way, for an ideology, as we know Kenyan politics is, an ideology that is fleeting, what makes sense to you? Political survival dictates that let me look for an office and an opportunity to advance my political career. And I expect every politician in ANC, in Ford Kenya, to be angling for an opportunity to better themselves. And that's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, in fact, I'll be surprised. Because the reality of Kenyan politics is that it has always been that in 1997, Raila Odinga himself walked out of opposition and joined the ruling party.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see that possibility happening?
Absolutely. And let me say this. Let me debunk the question of political parties. We just have some outfits here and there. We do not have anything that is grounded enough to be called a political party in terms of ideology, in terms of belief, and so on. So coming together of any players, they will come together. One person from opposition going into government, it will happen. Because basically we do not have a hard and fast positions to hang on, because basically we do not organize in that manner. We simply organize in terms of search for power, and whoever gives you power, it matters not.
Well, but now where does this leave one Musalia Mudavadi, the party leader for ANC? Because according to reports, and Samugina filed that report earlier on the big question, is that Wiper party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and his Ford Kenya counterpart appear not willing to go through with the swearing-in ceremony. Raila Odinga and his ODM party appear willing to push through with it, but Musalia Mudavadi is non-committal. Is that fear, indecision? Where does it leave him?
Let me tell you something that I learned quite recently. That if you want to survive in an upheaval, in an atmosphere where there's a lot of uncertainty, you need to rise and be the voice of calm and reason. You need to seem like you sit at the fence. This is a very important political skill, because when it comes to 2022, everybody will be asking, who can we trust? Mudavadi is positioning himself very cleverly to be the reasonable fellow within NASA, and that could win him big in 2022, because he can then form an alliance across whichever divide. Whenever you draw a hard line, it means you can only be on that side.
Yet we've seen previously politicians who've taken such a position, neither here nor there, actually get a lot of backlash from Kenyans. Do you think it is safe for Mudavadi to do that right now?
You know, the interesting thing about Kenyans is that we seem to have two extremes. We love very noisy politicians and we follow them very hard, but we also love politicians who are gentle, like the Honorable Mwai Kibaki and others, who do not ruffle feathers, seem to be focused, seem not to be a pain in any way, and therefore you can easily trust them. So that Musalia comes out very well. Remember that Kenyans don't like very strong and very abrasive people at the top. They love them somewhere in between, for MPs, for MCS. But at the top, we tend to go for rather measured and perhaps not outspoken. And you can see that those are some of the issues. So sometimes when you are a deputy, the people want you to be quiet, to wait for your turn. And I think Musalia does very well on that account, so that he knows that his turn will come, and that is not a bad thing to do.
Finally, on this big question tonight, a simple yes, no. Is it time for NASA to change tact?
Absolutely. The faster, the better.
Okay. Martin?
They have no choice. Wow. The gates had closed.
Martin Olo, advocate of the High Court and political analyst, Mark Bichachi, political analyst as well, helping us answer the question, is it time for NASA to change tact? I'll be sampling some of your views on Twitter. At Citizen TV Kenya, you can still join the conversation there, or text us on the number 22422, use the hashtag, The Big Question.